chapters here in Genesis. Uh, Jacob has a twin brother named Esau. Esau's the older brother by a few moments. He is the son of Isaac. He's the grandson of Abraham. His mother is Rebekah. And the best thing to know about Jacob is that he's an oily, manipulative type of guy. He sometimes does things in an underhanded way, which we'll actually come back to here in a minute. He was not the manly type. His brother was what you'd call the manly type. He was a very hairy man. He liked to go out and hunt. That wasn't Jacob. Jacob liked to stay home at the camp. He liked to cook. And so naturally, Esau became the favorite son of Isaac, and Jacob was the favorite son of Rebekah. But at one point, his brother Esau, who is the oldest, comes in, and Esau has the birthright. And so back then, the birthright, it was literally a patriarchal, legal, and spiritual inheritance that's given to the firstborn son. So part of this is the firstborn gets a double portion of whatever it is the father has. That's the part that is really going for the entire family. He's going to be the leadership of the entire family. He's also going to have the responsibility of the entire family. But the birthright goes a little bit deeper. They were also expected to be the spiritual authority. Now, the children of Abraham are under what we call a covenant promise. And that's the covenant that God made with Abraham, that through your children will come the salvation of the world. And so whoever gets the birthright also takes responsibility for the covenant promise. Now, the birthright could be traded or sold. It could even be transferred if the father thought whatever son was lying to get it wasn't worthy of it. But generally that didn't happen. Generally you would try to hold on to your birthright. Instead, Esau's out hunting in the field one day. He comes in, he's famished. He says, I'm going to die if I don't eat. Jacob's cooking a stew. He said, well, if you give me your birthright, I'll give you a bowl of stew. And Esau basically says, what's the birthright to me? Give me the stew. So he trades his entire birthright for a bowl of lentil stew and a piece of bread. So Jacob kind of tricks him out of the birthright. But there's another father to son thing that happens. It's called the blessing. Generally, as the father gets older, especially as he gets to the point of death, he would give generally the oldest son, who would also have the birthright, he would give him the blessing as well. Now, it's very possible that Isaac knew that Esau had traded his birthright to Jacob. It's very possible because Isaac was intent on giving his birthright to Esau. Except Rebekah heard his plans. So she gets Jacob. She takes some goat skins and puts them on the back of his neck and on his arms and hands. She cooks him a meal. He brings it in. By this time, Isaac is blind. But Isaac says, wait a minute, you're telling me that you're Esau, but I'm hearing the voice of Jacob. And so Jacob puts on Esau's clothes, has the hair on his neck and his arms, and his father feels his clothes, feels the hair on his arms and neck, and says, oh, you must be Esau. Because Jacob was a smooth man, is what they call it in the Bible. And so the blessing is given to Jacob instead of to Esau. Now the blessing is a spiritual transfer of the same things that the birthright was for. It was supposed to be that father to son moment where I am transferring you the leadership of this family. And so it still has that patriarchal covenant-based promise that a father is giving to his son. And it generally involved a physical symbolic act, such as putting hands on the head and giving the blessing through that. The blessing was considered to be so sacred that once it was given, it could not be rescinded. And so once Jacob stole the blessing from Esau, Isaac said, I cannot give you another blessing of the same kind. So not only had Jacob managed to steal the birthright, Now he's stolen the blessing. Now Esau is not happy about this, but he doesn't want to kill Jacob as long as Isaac's alive. So he swears, as soon as my father's dead, I'm going to take care of you. And so Rebekah tells her son, you need to leave. And so they're living down here in Beersheba. And he sends her 500 miles up to Aramean territory in Padanaram, a little town called Haran, where her brother Laban lives. Now, Laban is an interesting character. The first we hear about Laban is when Abraham sent his servant to Haran to get a wife for Isaac. When the servant arrived, he saw Rebekah, he focused on Rebekah, he gave her some gold bracelets and some gold rings. And so this is the first time we're hearing about Laban from back then. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah saying, this is what the man said to me, he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels? So it's interesting that the Bible points out, as soon as Laban sees these bracelets and these rings, suddenly he is very interested. And what we're finding out about Laban is that he is every bit as cunning, every bit as greedy, every bit as manipulative as Jacob. So Jacob coming to Laban is kind of like putting two peas in a pod. They're very much built from the same tree. Now later, after all this happens, Jacob at one point says to his wives, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. So Laban's going to do what is best for Laban. Just like Jacob is going to do what's best for Jacob. And so here's two men who have found someone who is as greedy and manipulative as the other one is. And so now these two are in business together. Now, Laban has two daughters, Leah and Rachel. And it says about them in Genesis 29:17, and Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in figure and appearance. So when it says Leah's eyes were weak, we're not exactly sure what the problem with her eyes is. We don't know if she's cross-eyed. We don't know if she just doesn't see very well. All it says is weak, and that comes from the Hebrew word rachot, which means tender, soft, delicate, or weak, but it implies fragility. And so sort of what the consensus has been is that her eyes were rheumy, weak and blurry. So have you ever seen somebody that had kind of weepy eyes? And think about it, when a man at the time often saw a woman, all he saw about her was her eyes, because she would be covered with a head covering and a veil. And so if the eyes aren't very attractive, it's going to be hard for them to be attracted to anything, because all they can see are her eyes. And so Leah has some problem there. It doesn't say she's ugly, but it says about Rachel, she's beautiful in figure and appearance. And as soon as Jacob sees Rachel, he instantly becomes captivated with her. It says a little bit earlier, as soon as he saw her, he ran over to her. She was bringing some flocks in. He watered all her flocks and went over and kissed her. So he's very attracted right off the bat. Now we get all that to set up our story. So here we finally get to our story. So Genesis 29, starting in verse 18. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. So stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him like only a few days. because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may have relations with her." So Laban gathered all the people of the place and held a feast. So Laban offers a bride price or a dowry of 7 years of labor. Now, at the time, your average bride price or dowry was 30 to 40 shekels. A shepherd made about 10 shekels a year. So generally it'd be 4 years of service, 3 to 4 years of service. He's offering double. Now, the bride price is not to pay for the bride, it's to prove to the bride's family that you have the ability to take care of her, that you've built a home for her that she will never want while she is in your house. And they called that bride price the mahar, because that's typically what was offered. But look how excited he is. It says all that 7 years was like a few days, because he was so excited about this woman. He's got what we call that honeymoon eyes on him. He sees all the perfection, doesn't see any of the problem yet. Just completely in love and smitten. Now, a betrothal at the time was generally a year-long time where the bride still lived with her family. Now, the husband would come over and visit, but he would have to go to his own house at the end of the day. At the end of the year, they would have a feast. Generally, the feast would be a week long. But after the first night of the feast, the father would take the bride and present her to the husband at the husband's home, and he would take her inside. And so they go to this marriage feast. Now, the whole point of the betrothal was to prove to you've already paid the bride price. Now you're showing the family, I've got my own home, I've got my own trade, I'm ready to be the husband that she deserves. That was the purpose of it. So Jacob goes through all that. They get to the wedding feast. Now, generally during the feast, the bride is covered with a head covering and a veil. And sometimes, if you've seen them, the veil included a covering that went over the eyes, where the woman could see easily out of it, but you really couldn't see easily inside of it. We don't know if this was the way that Laban pulls this off, or there could be another way. We'll get to that in just a second. But once the bride went to the husband's house and the marriage was consummated, then the marriage ceremony was considered complete. They didn't have a point where a priest got up and said, "Do you want to marry her?" It was nothing like that. They had the betrothal period, the feast, and she went home with him. And once they had relations, she would stay in the house with him. But let's move to verses 23 through 25. Now, in the evening, he took his daughter Leah, this is Laban, and brought her to him, to Jacob. And Jacob had relations with her. Laban also gave his female slave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a slave. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me?" So the way the wording in the Bible, it actually sounds like Rachel was at the feast. And then when Laban went to take his daughter to Jacob's tent, at some point, Rachel's swapped out for Leah. That's the way, it doesn't tell us exactly, but that's the way the wording is that comes with it. Now, before we start getting mad at Laban, is this much different than a man who puts on his brother's clothes and puts goat skins on his arms and his neck to get a blessing that wasn't his? He's had the same thing pulled on him that he pulled on his brother. So there's a little bit of justice that's going on here. But the interesting thing is there's no thought of negotiation or conversation in this. Laban didn't say, "Hey, it's really not traditional for the younger one to get married first. Why don't you take both of them?" He didn't try any of that. He just thought, well, if I'm going to get my way, then I'm going to do it in a way that I get my way. So there's no talk or negotiation. It's just complete. This is the way it's going to be. So verses 26 through 29. But Laban said, "It is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week, and he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Laban also gave his female slave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her slave. So the feast was going to continue another week. And so Laban says, "You continue this feast week with Leah, and at the end of that, I'll give you Rachel, and we'll do another feast week, and you can have her." Now, there's probably a number of reasons for this. Laban's a very stingy man. He doesn't want to share his money. If he can get both his daughters to be paid by Jacob, well, that's better for him. And so instead of talking to him about it and thinking Jacob may reject Leah, he may not want her. But if I do it this way, then I get what I want, and he's so desperate for Rachel that he'll do exactly what I want him to do. So this is Jacob's big love story. He has to work another 7 years. So when a bride price is normally 30 to 40 shekels, he's put in the equivalent of 140 shekels, 4 to 5 times any bride price had been paid before, because of how much he loved Rachel. Now, Jacob was around 84 years old at this time. And Jewish tradition and the oral history, what they called the Midrashim, says that Rebekah was between 22 and 30 years old. Now, some of the oral histories say that they're twins, but the Bible doesn't say that. It just says that Leah is older. But in the same way, it says Esau is older than Jacob, but that's just by a few moments. So we don't know if Leah is older by a few moments or by a few years. We just know that she is considered to be the older sister. And Laban's saying that because this is our tradition, I just couldn't give you the younger one. And obviously, I don't think that was his plan when they first agreed for him to work for 7 years. I think he was hoping somebody would come and pay the bride price for Leah and take her off his hands. But nobody did. And so instead of talking, he swaps them out. But Jacob doesn't want to just walk away because he wants to marry Rachel. That's who his brain is focused on. So 30 through 32. So Jacob had relations with Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban for another 7 years. Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb. But Rachel was unable to have children. Leah conceived and gave birth to a son and named him Reuben. For she said, "Because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me." Rachel is the favored wife. She's the one that Jacob truly worked for. Leah knew this. Now, it's very important in those families to produce male heirs. That was considered very honorable. It let the women stand upright and be proud. And so God doesn't open Rachel's womb, but he sees that Leah. Now, it's even more interesting when you read this in the KJV, because the KJV says, because he saw that she was hated. Not just unloved, hated. And so Rachel's the one who's got the beautiful body and the beautiful appearance. She's the one who's got the bright eyes. She's the one that Jacob worked for. She's the one that Jacob wanted. She's the one that the love story is all about. Because the love story is all about Jacob and Rachel. And where does Leah fit into this picture? But see, God didn't forget Leah. God remembered her very well. He wasn't punishing Rachel. He was just blessing Leah. And so Leah has a son, and she names him Reuben. And Reuben in Hebrew literally means, see, a son. She was hoping that by doing this, finally, her husband would show some love for her. She is just a wife who is desperate for the love of her husband. Verses 33 through 35. Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, or as the KJV says, hated, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, now this time my husband will become attracted to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore he was named Levi. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. Her hope was that her husband would love her as much as her husband loved her sister. That was what she kept hoping for. So the first child, Reuben, look, I've given you a son. The second child, Simeon, the Lord has heard me, and he's going to allow my husband to love me now. Levi, now my husband will become attached to me. Levi means attached. Simeon means the Lord has heard. And still nothing. She's still waiting for this great love story to have a part in it for her. And yet her sister, who has all the other things, has no kids, has no children. And here is her thought process working through it. She has her first son. See, I gave you a son. Now you can love me. See, God has heard that I have given you a son. Now you can love me. See, I've given you your third son. Now you will become attached to me. Now you will love me. In each case, no. So see, I give you a son. No, no love. See, now God has heard. No love. Says, now we'll be attached. Nope, no love. And finally she gets to Judah. And she says, you know what? I don't care if my husband pays attention or not. God loves me. And God has taken care of me. And it intentionally says there, she stopped having children. Now we'll go on to see in the next chapter that she has additional children. But this story is about the woman who was unloved, who's having all the children. Rachel eventually has 2, Joseph and Benjamin. But what makes this story so beautiful is that the line of Jesus does not pass through Rachel. And it doesn't pass through Reuben, Simeon, or Levi. The line of Jesus passes through the child where Leah says, now I will praise the Lord. And so God still had mercy on her. He was still watching out for what she needed. And he rewards her by making her the ultimate grandmother of the one who would save everyone. And so she didn't get that fairy tale love story like her sister did. She got the deeper and greater honor because of the God that she loved. And so what an incredible lesson comes through these verses. Because sometimes we see other people getting things that we don't have. Maybe they have more money. Maybe they have better clothes. Maybe they have more hair. Maybe, who knows, maybe they just seem to have better luck. They get better advantages. But God is the one who's deciding who is truly blessed. And you can see his blessing and recognize it and accept it or not. But why don't we keep our focus on God? Let him dispense the justice, and we just dispense love. That's all he asks from us. Leah didn't look the best. She wasn't the one that was tried for, but she's the one that God decided to build up. You know, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, don't store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust will corrupt and where thieves will break in and steal. Store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where none of that can touch it. That's what Leah learned in waiting and waiting and waiting for the husband who decided not to love her. She put her trust in the one that always will love her. And so we'll have this time this morning that if there's something you need to recognize, if you need to let everybody know what God is to you, we'll take that time now. But may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's all stand and sing.